Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience Week 6 Injury Report. We're going to update you on some pace stats because Pat Thorman was good enough to make his content free this week so we can talk about it, plus the Ezekiel Elliott situation along with Darren McFadden and Alfred Morris, plus a little bit later on I'll be running down the FanShare Sports tags for the highest owned and best pivot plays on DraftKings for the main slate in Week 6. Well, let's get right into this Ezekiel Elliott situation. He's been suspended 6 games. Again, it's being upheld. There's not going to be any appeal, it looks like, at least, so that leaves Ezekiel Elliott on the sidelines, and now Darren McFadden, Alfred Morris, and Rod Smith for deeper formats for you to choose from. In terms of your fab bid, you need to think about this very carefully because Ezekiel Elliott will be back the week after Thanksgiving, so for your fantasy playoff run, he shall return. So if you spend all your budget on Darren McFadden right now or Alfred Morris right now, you're not going to have those guys come fantasy playoff time, and you might need that fab budget a little bit later on. So in my mind, although Darren McFadden has not been active throughout the first 6 weeks of the season, I still think he is probably the premier pickup. And one of the reasons that I think this is that I have a suspicion, at least, that the Cowboys knew this could be coming down the pike. Therefore, the historically injury-riddled Darren McFadden, let's leave him on the sidelines a little bit. Make sure he doesn't get hurt. As we saw 2 years ago, he can step behind this line. Although the Cowboys' offensive line is not what it was the past 2 seasons, but he can pass catch, he can pass block, he can run between the tackles, whereas Alfred Morris is just mainly a between-the-tackles runner. That's it. You don't want any part of Elf in the receiving game. So for me, I would go McFadden, then I would go Morris. And if you play in like a super deep 14-team league or 16-team league, add Rod Smith just to see what happens, because that's the big thing. No matter what anyone tells you right now, at least, about this running back situation in Dallas, no one has a clue. No one does. It's just all guesswork. If you have the bench spots for picking up both Morris and McFadden, I would suggest doing that, even if it means cutting someone like, someone asked me, do I cut Tariq Cohen? And right now that Benny Cunningham has come back into the mix, like, yeah, you probably have to, because one of these guys, as long as it's not full-on, blown-out committee where they're both getting 50% of the snaps, one of these guys is going to be super valuable and potentially a running back one for the next 6 weeks. So that's something you probably do want to invest in. This is going to be an every-week starter. This opportunity does not come up very often. So again, for me, it would be McFadden, then Morris, then Smith. In terms of fab budget, listen, if you're out of it, you're like 1-4, and you think you can make a comeback, you might need to spend all the money on Darren McFadden. But just know that could be wasted money if Alfred Morris ends up getting the gig. So it's a really risky situation. How much do you want to invest? Also, this might be a nice time that if you have these guys on your roster already, start shopping around potential trades. I always have a tough time gauging the market for individual people of who you should trade. So I always say aim high. Not like ludicrously high, because that disenfranchises people from actually wanting to make a deal with you, but flood it out there, especially if you have both of them. Trade to the Zeke owner in your league, or if you're stacked at running back, find someone who has no running backs. I mean, you don't want to prop up a team, but if you can get a receiver that can help you, or an elite tight end, or anything, I think it's worth shopping around right now. And each individual in every individual league is going to assess the value of these guys differently. That's what makes projecting fab bucks or trade value in return exceptionally difficult. You know better than I do your league mates, so you go after it. But again, always aim high. Again, not like Antonio Brown for Darren McFadden high, but something that's relatively reasonable, but on the high end that you would feel very comfortable getting that back in return. All right? Let's move to injuries, because this is a loaded injury week. Fortunately, it looks like a lot of guys are going to play, or they've already been declared out. The doubtfuls, the game time decisions, not so bad. So it's not a terrible situation to be in. You just have to know who's going to be limited and what this means for guys down the chain. So first up, let's talk about the questionables, guys that probably are going to play. I'm going to say likely to play in Week 6. So at the very top, we have Ty Montgomery. And Ty Montgomery was wearing a flak jacket all week in practice, and the hype around Aaron Jones has to quell a little bit. It looks like Montgomery's going to come in and play limited snaps. He's not going to be the full-time guy. I'm still going to very comfortably start Aaron Jones in this situation. Although it is a bad matchup against the Vikings, I would not play Montgomery here. It's just a really tricky situation because you wanted to see Aaron Jones get 95% of the snaps. So if that was the case, he was going to get all the volume. So despite the matchup, he was still going to be a running back, low-end running back 1, high-end running back 2. Now, if he's only going to play like 75% of the snaps, the tough matchup more or less comes into it. If you go to dkplaybook.com, you can find my updated running back rankings. You'll see that I moved Aaron Jones down from 7 into the mid-teens. I'm still going to play him. for sure. Unless I have just superior options, which in a lot of my leagues I went wide receiver heavy, so I don't. But he's a capable start. Just really worry about the upside a little bit. But there's always the potential that Ty Montgomery comes in the game, or they get up by a bunch. They're like, hey, let's not risk hurting Ty Montgomery anymore and just give the ball to Aaron Jones. With Ty Montgomery, I find him very difficult to play this week. You can find a receiver who just ends up with more snaps, and that just works out well for you. In terms of DK, he could end up being a nice pivot play. Aaron Jones, that is, because people might get off of him hearing about Ty Montgomery. Very risky, but there's always the potential that he just gets all the workload, and this whole Ty Montgomery thing is a complete smokescreen. That's not out of the realm of possibility here. So when you cut the ownership down to like 2-3%, very risky, very, the floor is not really there, but the upside is. So that's something to consider if you want to play multiple lineups and don't mind burning a lineup or two with a potential disaster in it. More questionables from the week. Jordan Reed with his chest says he's going to play, but he's not 100%. Kelsey, at least according to Andy Reid with his concussion problem, memory loss, apparently not an issue for him. I mean, it was an issue, but they really don't care about him going forward. Looks like he's going to play. Julio's going to play. J.J. Nelson and Amari Cooper with their hamstring and knee injuries are going to be in the lineup as well. That brings us to Matt Forte. Matt Forte, with his toe injury, looks like he's going to play against the Patriots. Terrible news for anyone that went and picked up Elijah McGuire. To make matters even worse, Bilal Powell is now a game-time decision. But he hasn't practiced all week, and generally if you don't practice Friday, you do not play on Sunday. I have him listed as doubtful. I would not expect to see Bilal Powell in the Jets lineup this week against the Patriots. But the problem is now we don't know what the market share and split between Forte and McGuire is going to be. I had to bump down McGuire in my rankings. Initially, he was a top 20 option, a great guy to pick up off the waiver wire and get into your lineup, a great DraftKings play because of the price. And he's not necessarily a bad DraftKings play because of the price, but I was initially considering him for cash as a pivot off some of the more higher-owned guys because I thought the floor was going to be around the same. And the upside against that defense was going to be tremendous. Now that floor doesn't exist, because the Jets are crazy. They might just run Matt Forte 25 times in this game. I still much prefer McGuire over Forte in this situation, but if we're looking at like a 60-40 split, that could go either way, and I really don't know how the outcome is going to be. So be pensive with Elijah McGuire. I still think he's a start if you need him as a running back 2 or a flex play, or if you're in dire straits. Forte, not so much for me, but if it comes down to like Forte or like Adrian Peterson, probably end up going Forte because of the matchup. I still think that Ellington's the guy that you want to own in Arizona over Adrian Peterson in this spot. So it's a crappy situation. Forte's going to play. Wish he wasn't, but here we go. Them's the breaks when it comes down to it. More questionables who are likely to play this in Week 6. Rex Burkhead looks like he's going to be back with his rib problem. Mike Williams is going to get his first start of the year. It looks like for the Chargers, he will be on a limited snap count. John Brown still has the quad injury, but he played a ton last week. I wouldn't worry about him. The 2 quarterbacks, Derek Carr and Marcus Mariota, I am doing whatever I can to not play these guys this week. Mariota practiced again on Friday, but where they play on Monday night, we're not going to know until Monday night, unless they come out Saturday and be like, oh yeah, he's 100%. But that's not going to happen. And Derek Carr, the guy has a broken back. How the hell is this guy playing? Now going up against the Chargers pass rush that might just cripple him? Come on. That's probably a poor choice of words. That's not really, I don't want to see that happen. I strike that from the record. I'm going to leave it in. Just strike that from the record. It's a bad situation to put your franchise quarterback in who's dealing with massive back problems against a ferocious pass rush against an offensive line that frankly has not been as good as last year. Like, don't make Derek Carr a sitting duck out here. This could be a Sam Bradford situation from last week. So I'm going out of my way not to play Derek Carr, not to play Marcus Mariota. I would use Jacoby Brissett instead. I would use Kevin Hogan, Hollywood Hogan, instead, just for the floor purposes, because you don't know how healthy these guys are, how long they're going to stick in the game. That goes with a lot of the skill guys around them. Like with Derek Carr, yeah, Amari Cooper could be in a good spot here if Michael Crabtree ends up, running himself out, but we don't know who Casey Hayward's going to cover in that game, and if it ends up being E.J. Manuel, you don't want to start any of them, and with Mariota, as we saw last week, if it's Castle in the game, all these guys are pretty useless. If we had 100% Marcus Mariota, I would line up to play Rashard Matthews and Delaney Walker in both the running backs. The DeMarco Murray will be fine, but even if they want to talk about getting Derrick Henry more involved, I wouldn't worry too much about that. It'd be nice to see him to develop some sort of floor, but week to week, he's just too inconsistent. But right now, for the Titans, like, Murray's really the only guy I want to play. He's a top 20 option for me, and you probably have to play Delaney Walker in this circumstance just because, there's a lack of tight ends out there, and Alice Castle does throw to him. And on the Oakland side, like, who knows, man? It's going to be really tough to figure out. So I'd go out of my way to find potential replacements for them. I wouldn't try to get too tricky with banged-up quarterbacks. Anyone that held out for Sam Bradford last week saw what could happen, and there is no floor with these guys. And if you're only going to score 3 points from your quarterback, newsflash, you ain't going to win this week. So deal with that as it comes. More guys who are likely to play. And we have Rob Gronkowski. He just came out and said he's going to play, so I believe Gronk. Doesn't seem like a liar to me. So get Gronk back in. Your number one tight end going into the weekend. Jeremy Maclin in his shoulders. Jack Doyle with his concussion, George Kittle with his chest, all going to play. Matt Stafford was hobbled with an ankle injury and a thigh problem after last week's game against Carolina. He's good to go against the Saints. Could make a nice contrarian pivot play, too, because the Saints defense, well, they might be able to get to Stafford. You know, if Stafford has some time to chuck the ball down the field, it could be a good circumstance for him, and no one's going to play him. But he will not have the mobility that he once had. Listen, people just think of Matt Stafford as a statue. And remember when Matt Stafford was like the most injury-prone guy in football? Oh, you can't use Matt Stafford. He's always hurt. I think he hasn't missed a game in like 5 years right now. And now he's playing through the pain. Like sometimes when guys are hurt, guys get hurt. They're freak circumstances. So Matt Stafford, good to play in Week 6. I wouldn't downgrade any of the Lions, but their upside might be capped just a little bit because of this. Most of the Saints don't have a ferocious defense, but their pass rush has been top 10 in adjusted sack rate so far this season. We've seen Stafford go down double-digit times the last 2 weeks. That worries me a little bit when it comes to Matt Stafford. But again, we do know that there is some upside to be had against a really bad secondary with the Saints. Guys that are doubtful, probably not going to play in Week 6. It's looking like Bilal Powell is there. I already talked about him a little bit. We also have Devontae Parker. Ain't going to play. Fire up some Jarvis Landry and Jay Ajayi for the Dolphins. That's about it, though. I don't trust anyone else. You can take a shot on Kenny Stills if you want, but Lord knows, Jay Cutler doesn't throw the ball down the field at all. Rob Kelly not going to play, it looks like, with his ankle injury. That leaves Chris Thompson and Samaje Perine as the two running backs that you want. And as 10-point favorites in this game against the Niners, who've given up a ton of rushing yards this season, one of the worst defenses against opposing running backs in terms of giving up points. I actually like Perine a little bit more than Chris Thompson. Chris Thompson is a receiving back. They are limiting the in-between tackles, rushes that he's getting. So if you're in a game where you're up by a bunch, Perine makes a lot of sense to me. So everyone who's looking to play Elijah McGuire or even Ingram and Alvin Kamara in the mid-4,000 range as cash plays on DK, Perine is probably a bit more risky, but there's a chance that he ends up with 20 carries in this game. And 20 carries in this game against this Niners defense could be huge. He's available in a ton of leagues too. He's a top 24 running back option for me this week, but I do think that he has a nice floor. I hate that he doesn't get receptions, but he should dominate the goal line work, especially with Jordan Reed still banged up a little bit, despite the fact that he's going to play. Plus, San Francisco allows the opposing team to run a ton of plays against them. If we just look up the pace snaps for opposing teams, San Francisco is number 1. They allow 70.8 plays a game against this season. That is the most of any team in football. So just load up on skins this week. Kirk Cousins might not be a bad option either, but I do like Perine without the ground game of Rob Kelly around. I do think there's substantial touchdown upside to be had in this game and a lot of volume. Again, those receptions really kill me that they're not going to be there, but screw it. Let's go with it in a game where they're favored by so much. A nice correlation play between Perine and the Washington defense as well. More guys that are doubtful right now. Kenny Britt doesn't look like he's going to play. He re-aggravated his groin injury in practice. Kenny Golladay, still a long shot to play against the Saints. That means we'll get more of T.J. Jones as the third receiver for the Lions. I really like Marv Jones in this spot. And Brandon Oliver will probably not be backing up Melvin Gordon this week for the Chargers. So just more Melvin Gordon to go around. Perfect. Now, guys that have been declared out for Week 6. The big one is Stefon Diggs. He said he was going to play. Turns out he's not going to play. Sam Bradford also not going to play in this game. So you got Case Keenum, you got Adam Thielen, then you got some mix of Jarius Wright, Laquan Treadmill, and the now returned Michael Floyd into the Vikings offense. This makes Thielen a fringy top 10 play at wide receiver. When you look at the market share between the two with Case Keenum at quarterback so far this season, it was 22% each. There was no preference of who Keenum threw to. And now that you have no Stefon Diggs, I mean, the big play potential is gone, but we've seen Thielen go bonkers in games before. I think this is a great spot to use him in GPPs, to use him in cash games. Make sure to get him in your season-long lineups. I like this outlook for him. And then I prefer Kyle Rudolph as a part of the receiving game game here, and I just don't know who to touch of the other guys. Like, you're really taking a flyer. One of them could very well hit against this Packers secondary, but I cannot tell you who that's going to be. Hopefully Sam Bradford gets himself right, can be back, or potentially Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Roosevelt could be making his return at least at some point this season, but for now, Case Keenum's the guy. Not a terrible start either himself. He's on the case, and he's in this game, and he's facing the Packers secondary, which is not very good, and you know that even despite Minnesota having a really good defense, that Aaron Rodgers is probably going to find a way to score some points here. So that's something to watch out for. More guys that have been declared out already. We have Mohamed Sanu not going to play. Sterling Shepard not going to play. Paul Perkins not going to play. Marcus Wheaton's out 4 to 6 weeks with a groin injury. Corey Davis not going to play on Monday night. Andrew Luck also not playing. Terrence West is out for the Baltimore Ravens, which should lead to more Buck Javorius Allen. But that situation goes up and down every single week. I would have expected a lot of Alex Collins when they got up by a ton against the Raiders in Week 5. Didn't happen. All Buck Allen. And now we're all going to play Buck Allen, and Alex Collins is going to come back in the game. I would start Buck Allen. His floor in PPR formats, because of those receptions, is so high that you almost have to use him here. I believe I have him at running back number 17, running back 16 for the week. Just a great floor play because, let's face it, Joe Flacco is not throwing the ball downfield at all, except for occasionally to Mike Wallace. Far more comfortable checking down in this spot, and that's where Buck Allen comes into play. I mean, the guy can average like 4 or 5 catches a game if he does anything on the round. And God forbid he gets some goal line touches. Boom. You're looking at a potential running back 1 for the week based on his upside, but his floor makes him a very solid running back 2 in this spot at home against the Bears. Turns out Baltimore, way better at home. Chicago's defense, awful on the road, at least so far in 2017. So you might want to peep that. Again, I wanted to reference Pat Thorman, put this out on Twitter. You can go follow him. He's a Pro Football Focus. They've made this information free for the week, so I can talk about it a little bit. Love Pat, great guy, hates coming on shows, not just mine, but a lot of shows. He's an excellent writer, and the data that he comes up with is crucial and something that you should really pay attention to in terms of how to focus, especially on week-to-week play on DraftKings. So it's the high-pace, high-volume teams. Which teams are running the most plays this season? So for the year, the top teams in running plays per game is Arizona, 69.1, Philadelphia, 69, New England, 67.8, Denver, 67.3, and Houston, 66.6. And the opponents, the teams' defenses that are allowing the teams to run the most plays against them, San Francisco, Tampa Bay, New York Giants, New York Jets, and then Jacksonville and Tennessee are tied for next, which leads me to believe that the stack game that you might want to go after here is this Tampa Bay and Arizona game, or even Washington and San Francisco. Those are two games which should really go around the over for their projected point totals. We've seen the over-under in the Arizona-Tampa Bay game rise all week. It's now up to 45.5. I think it started at 42 earlier in the week, so that's kind of nuts. I still like the over in this situation with both teams passing the ball so much and running so many plays, and their defense allowing the other teams to run so many plays against them. That is a terrific spot to find some value and some sleepers. It's going to be really hard to figure out which Arizona receiver that you want to play, but if you pick right, it could be a bonanza. Or just place Carson Palmer and get everything out of it. He's a great price, too. You could use him in cash games if you don't want to pay up for Drew Brees. I prefer to pay up for Drew Brees, but Carson Palmer is still in an excellent spot in the situation. On the other side, Jameis could be too. I mean, I know Mike Evans has a really terrible matchup with Patrick Peterson on him, but if you want to play the contrarian method, I mean, Mike Evans is not going to be owned like he should be. Everyone's going on to Deshaun Jackson, and everyone's using Doug Martin in the backfield. I don't think it's a high probability play here that Mike Evans goes off, but based on his ownership, he still has elite talent. He still is a red zone target that he can provide substantial upside in this situation if this game turns into a shootout. Don't overlook Cameron Brate in this game either as a potential touchdown hog once they get inside the red zone. And if we flip it the other way, let's talk about the teams that are down in pace this season. We have Cleveland, Pittsburgh. I'm sorry, that is the opponent's snap rate. And so far this season, the team's running the fewest plays per game: Oakland, the Jets, Tennessee, Miami, and the Chargers. So those are teams that you generally do not want to have the fringy guys on their team because the potential for them to run more plays, thus getting more opportunity, simply isn't there. And I mean, some of those offenses, if they have focal points, that's perfect. Someone like Melvin Gordon and Keenan Allen in the Chargers offense work out really well. But the periphery guys, you're really playing boom or bust. That's why you see Terrell Williams, Terrell the Gazelle, have big weeks, then terrible weeks because the volume isn't always there for them because they don't run enough plays. On the opposite side, the opposing defenses that don't allow you to run plays against them, Cleveland's number one, followed by Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Carolina, and then Minnesota. The one good thing is that Green Bay doesn't run a ton of plays anyway, and Aaron Rodgers, as he showed on Thursday night, and even in that Dallas game, it doesn't take him very many plays to get down the field and score touchdowns. So I'm not too worried about that, but Kansas City and Houston are two teams that do run, a lot of plays anyway, but might get bogged down because of the slow pace of the other team's defense and offenses that you just don't have that overall volume that you're used to when it comes to it. All right, up next, I will be back and I will be talking about the fansharesports.com Week 6 tout sentiment rankings to identify the chalk plays on DraftKings this week and maybe some spots that you can pivot to. Pull it up on your screen right now. Go to Fanshare Sports, free to log in, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, welcome back to the Pat Mayo Experience. If you haven't checked out the Thursday show with myself, Cust, and Jeff Feinberg, I recommend doing it. It's best show of the year, by far. The best Cust Corner, too. I think it's like 47 minutes in. You might want to check that out. But for now, I hope you've pulled up fansharesports.com on your screen. If you haven't, again, it's free to log into. I'm sorting by starts by position to try to identify where the chalk is going to rest Week 6 on DraftKings. So let's get right into it. The number one guy this week, and we're going to notice at running back at least, that's where we'll start. It's going to be weird because there's two Saints running back inside the top three. It's the cheap chalk is where you're going with here. Alvin Kamara is number one on the list. He's followed by Kareem Hunt, Jerick McKinnon, Mark Ingram, Leonard Fournette, Elijah McGuire, Devonta Freeman, Javorius Allen, CJ Anderson, and Lamar Miller. So the big thing this week is if you're paying up for Fournette, or you're paying up for Hunt, or if you're paying down, you're going to take Kamara and Ingram, or Ingram and Jerick, and that's the way it's going to go. I bet you Jerick ends up being the highest owned guy at this slate. So like I mentioned during the injury section, I think that P. Ryan is a really sneaky guy to get in here because with Matt Forte coming back, it's just too hard to trust Elijah McGuire. A lot of these tag and start tags come from earlier in the week. That's going to have to work it out. On my DraftKings cheat sheet on DKPlaybook.com, I had to take McGuire out of the cheat sheet because I just don't trust him. I initially had him as a cash play. He looked like a great one. It's not going to happen anymore. So you really need to watch out with that coming in. I'm surprised Buck Allen is so high, but he's someone in the mid tier that you can use. Lamar Miller too at $5,400. I'm shocked he's so down, but everyone seems to be investing in Watson, Fuller, and DeAndre Hopkins as this is a big shootout game for them because they're such big favorites, but generally when teams are giant favorites at home, the running back is the one that gets involved. So it's shaping up like Lamar Miller could be a decent GPP play that's not going to have super high ownership. The one problem is if they get up by too much, does Donta Foreman come in the game? That's problematic. But if you want to pair up a Houston running back, i.e. Lamar Miller, you're not going to use Foreman, take the risk and use Houston's defense. That's a nice correlation play that I like a lot. Always pairing up that ground and pound running back with the defense could create, the whole key behind it would be that you would get to use, the defense would create a turnover, create a short field, the running back would punch it in. That is the ideal situation that you're looking for in this circumstance, and that's why I like P. Ryan and the Washington defense as well to do the same thing. But when you pay up, I guess the biggest thing that you can notice is Hunt and Fournette. That's where you gotta go. That's what everyone is saying you need to do. Where's Todd Gurley? He's going up against what is one of the worst run defenses in football and the best pass defense in football. I know Pittsburgh did not follow this game plan in Week 5, but run the ball against the Jags. Even if you're down, run the ball against the Jags. Todd Gurley, you kidding me with his market share? I know Tavon Austin's been getting somewhat involved, and they did pass to Malcolm Brown last week, but let's be real here. If this is a competitive game where they're close, they're going to pound Todd Gurley between the tackles, and maybe even use him in the receiving game as well. For GPPs, as much as I like Fournette, as much as I like Hunt, although Pittsburgh's defense is pretty good here, I like Todd Gurley the best of those guys. Like, if no one's going to use Todd Gurley, I think that's a great spot, and obviously there's no Le'Veon Bell on this list either. People just don't want to be involved with him. I kind of understand it this week, but the reception base for Le'Veon Bell, if he can sneak his way into the end zone once, or God forbid twice, you're going to get like a 3% Le'Veon Bell in the Millionaire Maker, and with the ability to pay down at running back in spots like we've seen with Jerick, with Ingram, I hate Ingram, but people are going to use Ingram, with Kamara, with P. Ryan. There's enough going on here that you can afford some top-tier guys this week, and you might as well put use to them. If everyone's going to use Hunt, and everyone's going to use Fournette, Gurley and Bell make a lot of sense to me. That way you can use the chalk running backs and diversify yourself all at the same time and still make it work within the context of your salary cap. So that's something to really watch out for at the running back position. let's move to wide receivers. When I pull this up, we got DeAndre Hopkins, by far the highest tagged receiver this week. 26 start tags to Chris Hogan, who's second, and Will Fuller, who's second at 17. They're followed by Taylor Gabriel, Amari Cooper, Deshaun Jackson, Marvin Jones, Keenan Allen, Larry Fitzgerald, and Adam, I got a feeling. Ooh. No digs. That number's going to go way up. I've already mentioned I love Thielen. Cash, GPP, doesn't matter. I don't care how popular he is. This is an excellent spot for Adam Thielen to really go off. So I'm all in on that one. Fitzgerald, I mean, he's been kind of disappointing even in good spots. I know he's had a good week, but there was that week against San Francisco he had to bail you out at the very last second. Yeah, I know. They all count, but I prefer to play John Brown in that game, to be perfectly honest with you, and he's cheaper. You don't have to use as much of him in terms of exposure in case, Larry Fitzgerald ends up being super highly owned. I really like Marv Jones down in that area as well, but these are the guys that we're really gravitating towards this week. Gabriel, I think, makes a lot of sense. There's no Sanu. However, if you're going to get Taylor Gabriel chalk at $4,600 in a game where they might be able to run the ball down the throats, Devonta Freeman's another great play that no one's really talking up in this circumstance. So I know he's on the list, but it doesn't seem like people are too committed to him. I could see Coleman and Freeman just run the ball down the throats of Miami here. And, the big play potential for Gabriel is always there. I'd prefer Deshaun Jackson if they're going to be... I know Deshaun Jackson is higher priced, but if they're around equivalently owned, I would just much prefer the safety in the shootout in that game that I've already pointed to, rather than Taylor Gabriel, who can get left behind, frankly. What if Austin Hooper scores a big touchdown? Then you don't need to throw the ball downfield anymore, and Taylor Gabriel's kaput. I don't mind using him. I will be using him, but I don't think you need to go mental putting him in every single lineup. I don't think that he should be super chalky. I will be underweight to the field on him, and I will probably be underweight to the field on the Houston receivers as well. I get where the upside comes with Will Fuller in this circumstance, and the DeAndre Hopkins target base is right there, but I've already pointed out that the Browns do not allow a ton of plays to be run against them. Now, that could be counteracted by Houston running so many plays on their end, but we've seen garbage time DeAndre Hopkins come out with Will Fuller, and we saw them get up by a bunch against Tennessee and continue to throw the entire time. That just might not need to happen against the Browns. So I don't think it's risky to use them, but I don't know if their upside is as high as you may think if this game gets a little bit out of control. So there's very easy pivots at the very top, whether it's Antonio Brown. I mean, whenever you look at Antonio Brown, no one's talking about Julio Jones. Everyone wants to play Taylor Gabriel. Apparently he's close to 100% with that hip problem that he came into the week with. Why not? Jarvis Landry's not on the list. Devontae Parker's not playing. So there are circumstances that you can go to get away from the chalk very easily and point to players that have around equivalent upsides. Even if the matchup isn't the best in the world, it's very close. And that's really what you want to do with these pivot plays. Don't take some loser who no one's going to own. At least take a really good guy. The best way to do it is just look at the price tag of the super chalky player and look at the two guys that are one above him, one below him. Are those guys really good? Could those guys go off? Then, yeah, use those guys. Devontae Adams, not on this list either. Jordy Nelson, I know he's banged up, not on this list. Both guys that tend to kill Minnesota over and over and over again. So there's a lot of really good contrarian plays at receiver, and receiver is generally the place where you can really go contrarian because there's a lot of variance week to week in terms of who the highest scoring wide receivers are. That's always my favorite place to differentiate if I have to. Let's move to quarterbacks now. And unsurprisingly, after back-to-back 2-touchdown weeks, Deshaun Watson, by far the highest ranked, 41 start tags. Boom. Listen, if you want to use Deshaun Watson, go nuts. I'll be using a portion of them too. Drew Brees is my favorite cash game play, followed then by Carson Palmer because of the savings and the high output I expect from that game. You can even go down to Kevin Hogan if you really wanted to save a lot of money. He's only $4,600, and I think that because of his legs, there is a floor for him with potential a lot of garbage time against Houston, whose defense is pretty banged up right now, so maybe they don't just get the insane pass rush that we're used to from Watt and Clowney. Maybe it's just Clowney coming after him. Maybe you can elude him and run out the other way. That's a possibility too. But just for the floor/upside purposes, in a week where you can save a lot of money, Drew Brees is the quarterback that I'm going to be massively overweight on. But the entire top 10, as we look through it, Deshaun Watson, Kirk Cousins, Drew Brees, Carson Palmer, Kevin Hogan, Josh McCown, Matt Stafford, Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers, and Matt Ryan. One name is noticeably absent from this list. I know the matchup is bad, but it seems to me at the outside of the week, I thought because Tom Brady was so much and this, with them as big double-digit favorites, that this pointed to a Mike Gillislee week. And that could be the case. And I thought that no one would own the Patriots receivers. Now with Gronk going to play, Kevin Hogan being talked up, and Tom Brady making this list, it looks like people are going to use the Patriots stack. What about the Packers stack? let's be real here. Aaron Rodgers can light anyone up. No one's using Nelson. No one's using Adams. No one's using Cobb. No one's using Martellus Bennett. Just throw those guys in there if you want to. Let's say you're playing the 20 entry max and you want to build 3 Aaron Rodgers lineups along with a triple stack with Packers receivers. That sounds pretty sensible to me. Now, the floor isn't going to be there because the matchup isn't great, but the upside always is when you have Aaron Rodgers on the other side of the ball. It's always just very interesting to me. And this has been a big year for paid down at quarterback. This is a situation where you can pay up, and that way you can use all the chalk running backs you want, all the chalk receivers you want, the chalk defense, because your quarterback and one of your receivers is going to be super low owned and they have super high upside. That is a situation I would not mind getting myself into. Tight ends this week is super problematic because Ryan Griffin is by far the most talked up guy. And listen, I like him. He's $4,000. Anyone you can play against the Browns at tight end tends to work out pretty well. But if he's going to be the chalk, almost like the Austin Seferian-Jenkins chalk of last week, if you can find the one guy that goes off, the Ed Dickson from last week of the world, you're going to be doing a lot better off. So in cash games, if you can afford to use Ryan Griffin, I have no problem with that. He's number 1 in the sentiment tag right now. He's followed by Austin Seferian-Jenkins, George Kittle, AJ Darby, Evan Ingram, Zach Miller, Hunter Henry, Rob Gronkowski, Cameron Brate, and then Austin Hooper. Now, I realize that 2 of those guys are in the Sunday Nighter. They're not all part of the main slate, so don't worry about them. But that does give you some insight through the Monday primetime slate, along with the Sunday Nighter and Thursday night game, where you could potentially pivot off of where that chalk is going to rest. But like if Griffin, Jenkins, and Kittle are going to be the top 3 guys, all because they have decent matchups or they had good weeks last week, it's a really easy circumstance to pivot off to. I already mentioned Martellus Bennett. You can beat the Minnesota Vikings in terms of red zone opportunities with your tight end. I think that's a nice spot. I don't see Kyle Rudolph on this list. He'll get chalk here because Diggs is out, but a lot of people have kind of locked into who they want to play already, so I like Kyle Rudolph in this circumstance. Cameron Brate, I already mentioned in this high-paced game, could be in line for a few red zone looks. I mean, that's something to target. So there are really easy guys that you can go on to. I also like David Njoku as well, with Kevin Hogan starting. I think he's a low-floor player, but high upside because of that touchdown potential. He's already caught 2 touchdowns this season, and guess what? Both from Kevin Hogan. 2 of the 3 touchdown passes Kevin Hogan has thrown this season have gone to David Njoku. He's only $3,000. So I think this is a really easy spot to pivot off of the chalk at tight end because all these guys are super risky. Like Ryan Griffin, I mean, if it's Steven Anderson catches a touchdown, Ryan Griffin is useless. And with Austin Seferian-Jenkins, if he doesn't catch a touchdown, well, I like his floor for PPR purposes to pay off that, $4,300. Now we're getting up in price a little bit. 5 for 27 ain't cutting it no more, ASJ. We need more targets. And if he catches a touchdown, he's going to be great. And he does have a high potential to do that, but if he doesn't, it's not going to be the biggest stunner in the world. Gronk, now that he's playing, if you do want to pay up and pay down at running back, like we've seen, or pay down at receiver, or pay down at defense, and you can afford Gronk, it never really hurts to have Gronk in GPPs. The guy can go nuts at a moment's notice, and he is the best tight end in football. Always a spot to do it. But if you want to pivot off those $4,000-ish tight ends, it's not too difficult to do that. Defenses. I've already stated my favorite defenses of the week. In terms of who I'm going to be playing for cash games, Washington for GPPs. I like the Saints because of their pass rush and the Steelers because of their pass rush, combined with the low ownership because they're playing the mighty Chiefs. But the Chiefs are all banged up on the offensive line, so do not forget about that. It's risky because the Chiefs can go crazy on you, but there is sack potential, turnover potential with a lot of guys banged up. I know Kelsey's going to play, and I know Hill is going to play, but both are slightly hobbled, and now there's no Chris Conley, which means a bigger role for Albert Wilson. You start taking pieces away, you start limiting the amount of time Alex Smith has to throw, and maybe this offense looks a little bit different. So that's just something to consider. If Kareem Hunt runs the ball 35 times down their throat, it probably works. We'll see if they do that or not, though. In terms of who is chalky this week at defense, the Atlanta Falcons. Number 1, 26 start tags, followed by the Baltimore Ravens, Denver Broncos, Skins, Tampa Bay Bucks, Houston Texans, Jacksonville Jags, KC Chiefs, New Orleans Saints, and the New England Patriots. I thought that the Rams would be higher on this list, and initially at the beginning of the week, I thought, you know what, Jacksonville, the Rams, both set up really well to be opposing defenses. The problem is if both teams decide to run the ball each way, you don't really want that. There's not a lot of fantasy points to be derived from teams running the ball. Forcing a fumble on a running back is much more difficult than generating pressure on the quarterback and forcing him into a bad decision, which tends to lead to turnovers, leads to fantasy points, short fields, potential scores. But if there's a circumstance where I like Gurley a lot, I will use the Rams defense for that correlation play, if Gurley can get them up in this game. Or they somehow find a way where the defense scores a touchdown, and then you force Jacksonville to pass, take away their one big asset of running the ball, and Blake Bortles is throwing the ball 30 times in this game, watch out. That's turnover city. So if the Rams are going to be a contrarian defensive play, I'm going to mix them in as well. I personally do not like to mix and match too many defenses. I like to hunker down and use just a mix of 3 or 4 across 20 or so lineups and really hit big if one of those hits. So for me, again, the Redskins, my primary cash defense, I will be using in GPPs as well. Steelers, Saints, and now I might actually up my exposure to the Rams and use them in every single lineup that I have Todd Gurley in as well. Good luck in week 6, and hopefully this helped you out a lot. Remember to give the video a like, go back and watch the shows from earlier in the week, give those a like too, and subscribe to the DraftKings YouTube channel for all the video versions of the Pat Mayo experience. And for audio versions, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Audio Boom, always uncut, on demand. Listen to it whenever you want. Don't be afraid to tune in noon to the DraftKings Facebook page either. I will be there along with Pierce Dietrich and Adam Kaufman, getting you ready for all the inactives, all the late swaps, everything you need to do in the last second to get you prepped for week 6 and try to make some big money in your lineups on DraftKings this week. For season long and for my cheat sheet and for all my picks, you can go to the DK Playbook and find everything updated there. I'm Pat Mayo. Good luck this week. Best of luck, actually. Best of luck in week 6. Let's make this a big week. I'll see you next time.